Nikolai Reyes had been running across Manhattan since 6 in the morning with 2 coffees in one hand and a leather document bag hanging from his shoulder. By noon, his white dress shirt was already wrinkled, his feet hurt, and he still had 4 deliveries left before the end of his shift. That was normal. Working corporate logistics in New York meant rich executives expected miracles from underpaid people carrying paperwork through traffic and rain. At 2:17 p.m., his supervisor called him while he was standing outside a law office downtown. "Nikolai, don't go back to the warehouse yet. I need 1 more delivery. I've already done 11. And this one pays triple. VIP client." That got his attention. Who? Valion Group. Nikolai stopped moving for a second. Everybody knew Valion Group. Billion-dollar tech company. Half the city either worked for them or wanted to. What's the catch? The board meeting starts in less than 40 minutes, and legal forgot to send the original signed contracts upstairs. They need hand delivery, direct to executive level. Nikolai sighed and rubbed his forehead. Of course they do. Don't lose those papers, or we're dead. 20 minutes later, Nikolai walked into the massive Valion Tower while rain hammered against the glass outside. The lobby alone looked more expensive than his apartment building. Black marble floors. Giant digital screens. Employees in fitted suits, moving around like they had somewhere important to be every second of the day. Meanwhile, Nikolai looked like a tired delivery guy trying not to drip rainwater on the floor. A receptionist waved him over quickly. The board meeting moved upstairs. 14th floor. Into the hallway. That's it. Hurry. Nikolai took the elevator up while fixing his tie in the reflection of the metal doors. He hated executive floors. People there always looked at him like he didn't belong breathing the same air. The elevator opened onto a silent hallway lined with dark glass walls and expensive artwork. He checked the time. 3 minutes before the meeting. Perfect. He walked quickly toward the last door at the end of the hall, adjusted the document bag on his shoulder, and pushed the door open without knocking. Then everything stopped. Fabian Vale stood less than 10 feet away from him. The Fabian Vale, CEO of Valion Group, 34 years old, tech billionaire, coldest man in New York according to every business magazine online. And at that exact moment, Fabian was halfway through changing clothes. His charcoal suit jacket hung over a chair. His black dress shirt was unbuttoned. Tattoos disappeared beneath the fabric stretched over his chest and arms. Water still clung to his skin like he had just rushed out of another meeting. For 1 full second, neither man moved. Fabian looked up slowly. Nikolai's brain completely shut down. Oh my God. The words flew out before he could stop them. He immediately turned around so fast the document bag slipped off his shoulder. Papers exploded across the floor. No, sorry. I thought this was... Fabian still hadn't said anything. That somehow made it worse. Nikolai dropped to his knees, trying to shove contracts back into folders with shaking hands. I'm leaving. Right now. Immediately. You won't ever see me again. One paper slid directly toward Fabian's shoes. Nikolai wanted the floor to open and swallow him alive. Fabian bent down first and picked up the contract calmly. You're late. Nikolai blinked. What? The board meeting started 4 minutes ago. His voice was deep, controlled, impossible to read. Nikolai grabbed the rest of the papers quickly. I got sent to the wrong room. You opened a private office without knocking. I noticed. Fabian buttoned his shirt slowly without taking his eyes off him. Clearly not fast enough. Nikolai's face burned so hard it physically hurt. I swear I wasn't trying to. I know. That surprised him. Fabian walked past him toward the door, now fully composed again like nothing had happened. Conference room B is across the hall. Nikolai stood there frozen. Fabian paused beside him. Unless you plan on standing in my office forever. Right. Sorry. Nikolai practically ran out of the room. He delivered the contracts to legal, signed the confirmation forms, and escaped the building as fast as possible. By the time he reached the street, rain soaked through his jacket instantly. His heart still wouldn't calm down. He had just walked in on Fabian Vale changing clothes. There was absolutely no chance his company would keep the Valion contract after this. Nikolai spent the next 2 hours waiting to get fired. Instead, at 5:43 p.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. "Hello. Mr. Reyes," a woman said professionally. "This is Evelyn from Executive Affairs at Valion Group. Mr. Vale would like to see you tomorrow morning at 9. Nikolai nearly dropped his phone again. "Why? I wasn't informed. Am I in trouble?" A pause. "Mr. Vale did not say." That was not comforting. After the call ended, Nikolai stared at the wall of his tiny apartment for almost 10 straight minutes. His best friend Matteo called later that night and immediately said, "You sound like you witnessed a murder." Worse. "What happened?" "I accidentally walked into Fabian Vale's office while he was changing." Silence. Then Matteo started choking laughing so hard Nikolai almost hung up on him. "I'm serious. You saw the Ice King shirtless?" Matteo. "Oh, this is incredible. I'm probably getting blacklisted from corporate Manhattan." Worth it. It was not worth it. The next morning, Nikolai barely slept. He arrived at Valion Group 20 minutes early wearing the only navy suit he owned. The receptionist from yesterday recognized him immediately and looked amused for some reason. "That way," she said, pointing toward the executive elevators. Great. Everybody knew. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt longer this time. Nikolai rehearsed apologies the entire way up. When the doors opened, Evelyn greeted him outside a massive office suite. "Mr. Vale is expecting you." She opened the door before Nikolai could panic properly. Fabian stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Black suit, silver watch, perfect posture, completely untouchable. He turned when Nikolai entered. "Sit." Nikolai sat immediately. Fabian remained standing for a moment before walking toward the desk. "You've worked for Morrison Logistics for 3 years." Nikolai blinked. "Yes. You were pre-law before leaving college." That caught him off guard. "How do you know that?" Fabian ignored the question. "Last November you flagged inconsistencies in a vendor contract during a routine delivery." Nikolai frowned slowly. "That wasn't a big deal. It prevented someone from approving fraudulent numbers worth $2.3 million. Nikolai stared at him. "Wait, that was your company." Fabian sat down across from him. "You've also submitted 7 operational correction reports through internal routing systems, despite it not being part of your job description." "I was just trying to help." "Most people don't help unless they benefit from it." Nikolai didn't know what to say to that. Fabian opened a folder on the desk. Nikolai's name sat on top in clean black letters. That made him nervous immediately. "I'm restructuring one of Valion's internal operations divisions," Fabian said calmly. "Efficiency is dropping. I don't trust half the executives currently managing it. And this involves me because you notice things other people miss." Nikolai let out a short laugh. "I also accidentally walk into private offices." Fabian's mouth twitched slightly like he almost smiled. "Almost. It happens." "No, I'm pretty sure that only happens to me." Fabian leaned back slightly in his chair. "I'm offering you a 3-month contract position as operational project assistant under my direct supervision." Nikolai thought he misheard him. "What? You'll work with my team directly. Temporary evaluation period. Higher salary than your current position. You can't be serious." "I don't waste time making jokes, Mr. Reyes." Nikolai stared at him in complete disbelief. "Why me?" Fabian held his gaze for several seconds before answering. "Because everybody around me knows how to look impressive. Very few people know how to be useful." The room went quiet. Nikolai's pulse kicked harder for reasons he didn't fully understand. "This is insane," he admitted softly. "Probably. And if I say no?" Fabian closed the folder calmly. "Then you continue carrying paperwork across Manhattan while people less intelligent than you make decisions above your head." That hit harder than Nikolai expected. Fabian stood and walked toward the window again. "You don't belong where you are now." Nobody had ever said something like that to him before. Not like they meant it. Nikolai swallowed slowly. "When would I start?" Fabian looked back at him. "Monday." That soon? You already opened the wrong door. We might as well continue the disaster. Nikolai laughed before he could stop himself. Fabian stared at him for a second, then finally smiled properly for the first time. Small, brief, dangerous. It completely changed his face. And suddenly Nikolai understood why half the business world was terrified of Fabian Vale. Because a man that controlled could ruin someone without even raising his voice. But standing there in the morning light, looking directly at Nikolai with the faintest smile still lingering near his mouth, he looked lonely more than cruel. Fabian walked back toward the desk and held out his hand. So, Mr. Reyes, are you accepting the offer? Nikolai stood slowly and shook it. Fabian's grip was warm and firm. Yes, Nikolai said quietly. I am. Fabian nodded once. Good. Then, just as Nikolai turned toward the door, Fabian added calmly, next time try knocking first. Nikolai groaned into his hands while Fabian actually laughed behind him. By the end of Nikolai's first week at Valion Group, he realized two things very clearly. First, Fabian Vale barely slept. Second, working directly under him felt less like having a job and more like surviving a controlled disaster every single day. Fabian expected perfection from everyone around him. Meetings started exactly on time. Reports had to be precise down to the last number. One missing detail could earn a stare cold enough to shut down an entire conference room. Yet somehow, Fabian never yelled. That was the terrifying part. He stayed calm while destroying people with a single sentence. This projection is lazy. Did anyone actually read this before presenting it to me? I asked for solutions, not excuses. Nikolai watched senior executives fold under that voice within minutes. But Fabian treated him differently. Not softer, just differently. Fabian questioned him constantly, challenged every suggestion he made, pushed him harder than everyone else in the room. At first, Nikolai thought the man regretted hiring him. Then he noticed something strange. Fabian only argued with people whose opinions he respected, which meant Fabian respected him. That realization made things much more dangerous, especially because Fabian had started looking at him differently too. It happened in small moments at first, a glance lasting 1 second too long during meetings. Fabian remembering how Nikolai took his coffee without asking. Fabian texting him late at night about project updates that absolutely could have waited until morning. Then came the dinners. At first, they were technically work dinners. Fabian would keep Nikolai after meetings to go over reports while expensive takeout sat untouched on the conference table. But eventually the conversations stopped being only about work. One night Fabian looked up from his laptop and suddenly asked, "Why did you leave law school?" Nikolai nearly choked on his drink. You really like asking deeply personal questions without warning. Fabian didn't even look guilty. You didn't answer. Nikolai leaned back in his chair. My mother got sick. Tuition became impossible. Fabian's eyes stayed on him quietly. She died 2 years later, Nikolai continued. After that, I just never went back. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but Fabian said them seriously. No fake sympathy. No corporate politeness. Nikolai shrugged lightly. You get used to missing people eventually. Fabian looked away after that, like he understood the sentence too well. Another week passed. The project grew bigger. Fabian brought Nikolai into strategy meetings with executives twice his age. Some of them clearly hated it, especially Liam Cross, senior vice president. Perfect suits, perfect smile, eyes like a shark. He watched Nikolai constantly during meetings. One afternoon, Liam stopped him outside the elevator. Interesting promotion you got. Nikolai pressed the elevator button calmly. Temporary contract. Still impressive. Fabian doesn't usually trust people this quickly. Nikolai forced a polite smile. Guess I got lucky. Liam smiled back, but there was nothing friendly about it. Be careful. People who get too close to Fabian usually disappear fast. The elevator doors opened before Nikolai could respond. The conversation stayed in his head longer than he wanted. especially because Fabian really was acting strange around him now. 3 nights later, they stayed at the office past midnight reviewing financial projections. Nikolai sat cross-legged on the couch with his laptop, while Fabian worked at the desk nearby. The silence between them had become comfortable somehow. Dangerously comfortable. Nikolai looked up suddenly. You know you scare everyone here, right? Fabian didn't stop typing. Good. No, seriously. I watched the director nearly sweat through his shirt because you asked him one question. That sounds like a competence issue. Nikolai laughed. Fabian glanced at him briefly before looking back at the screen. There, Nikolai said immediately. You just did it again. Fabian frowned slightly. Did what? That almost smile thing. I don't smile. You literally are right now. I'm not. You absolutely are. Fabian finally looked at him fully. You spend an unusual amount of time observing me. The air shifted instantly. Nikolai felt it. So did Fabian. Neither spoke for about 3 seconds too long. Then the lights went out. The entire office dropped into darkness. Nikolai sat upright. What the hell? A loud mechanical sound echoed somewhere in the building before emergency red lights flickered on faintly. Fabian stood immediately. Backup generator failed. You sound weirdly calm about that. I own the building. That doesn't answer my question. Fabian grabbed his phone from the desk. The storm probably damaged. The floor suddenly jerked beneath them. Nikolai grabbed the couch automatically. Was that thunder? Fabian didn't answer. Nikolai looked up and froze. Fabian's face had gone completely pale. Not stressed. Not annoyed. Terrified. Another metallic sound echoed through the building. Fabian took one sharp breath and stepped backward instinctively. Fabian. No response. Nikolai stood slowly. Hey. Fabian pressed one hand against the edge of the desk hard enough for his knuckles to turn white. And then Nikolai understood. This wasn't about the blackout. This was panic. Real panic. Talk to me, Nikolai said carefully. Fabian shut his eyes briefly. The elevators. What about them? A long silence. 6 years ago, Fabian said quietly. One malfunctioned during a fire alarm. Nikolai stayed still. Fabian's jaw tightened. It dropped 4 floors before emergency brakes caught. Oh, you were inside? Fabian nodded once. How long were you stuck? 3 hours. That explained everything immediately. The darkness. The noise. The loss of control. Nikolai moved closer, carefully, like approaching a frightened animal. Okay, look at me. Fabian tried to regain composure instantly. I'm fine. No, you're not. Fabian's breathing shook slightly. That scared Nikolai more than anything else. Fabian always looked in control. Always. Seeing cracks in that control felt intimate somehow. Sit down, Nikolai said softly. Fabian stared at him for a second before finally sitting on the couch. Nikolai sat beside him. Close enough to help. Not close enough to overwhelm him. You want to know something embarrassing? Nikolai asked casually. Fabian gave him an exhausted look. Not particularly. When I was 14, I fainted during a school presentation because I thought everyone was judging me. Fabian blinked once. That's your comforting story? I'm improvising. To his surprise, Fabian let out a short laugh. Small, but real. Breathe slower, Nikolai said quietly. You're okay. The storm rumbled again outside. Fabian's shoulders tensed immediately. Without thinking too much about it, Nikolai reached over and took his hand. Fabian froze. For one dangerous second, neither moved. Then Fabian held on. Tightly. The red emergency lights painted shadows across Fabian's face while the storm continued outside the windows. Nikolai kept talking about random things just to distract him. Bad subway musicians. Terrible coffee. The fact that Valion employees walked too fast for no reason. Eventually Fabian's breathing steadied. An hour later the power finally returned. The office lights flickered back on. Neither man moved immediately. Fabian looked down slowly and realized they were still holding hands. Nikolai pulled away first. The silence afterward felt heavy. Different. Fabian stood and adjusted his sleeves carefully. You should head home. Nikolai nodded, though neither of them sounded normal anymore. As they walked toward the elevators, Fabian suddenly spoke again. "Come to my place tomorrow night." Nikolai looked over immediately. "For work?" Fabian pressed the elevator button. "If calling at work makes you feel safer, sure." The elevator doors opened. Nikolai stepped inside slowly. Fabian met his eyes one last time before the doors closed. And for the first time since starting this job, Nikolai had the terrifying feeling that whatever was happening between them was no longer professional at all. Nikolai spent the entire next day trying not to think about Fabian holding his hand in the dark, which was impossible. Every time Fabian walked past his desk, every time their eyes met during meetings, Nikolai remembered the feeling of Fabian's fingers tightening around his like he was afraid to let go. And Fabian was acting different too. Quieter, more distracted. At one point during a strategy meeting, Fabian completely stopped listening to an executive mid-sentence because Nikolai had laughed at something Matteo texted him on his phone. Fabian's eyes lifted immediately. Something funny? The entire conference room went silent. Nikolai cleared his throat. "Just my friend being annoying." Fabian stared a second too long before looking back at the presentation. "Continue." 3 executives exchanged looks instantly. Great. By 7 that evening, Nikolai stood outside Fabian's penthouse apartment, feeling underdressed, underprepared, and dangerously aware that this was not normal boss behavior anymore. Fabian opened the door himself. No suit tonight, just black sweatpants and a dark gray t-shirt that fit his body way too well for Nikolai's peace of mind. "You're late," Fabian said. "It's been 30 seconds. That's still late." But there was no real bite behind it. Nikolai walked inside slowly. The penthouse looked exactly how he imagined Fabian lived. Expensive, minimalist, quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. Then he noticed something unexpected. No personal photos. No decorations. No signs another human being had ever lived there. The place looked beautiful and lonely at the same time. Fabian noticed him looking around. "You can judge the furniture later. Come help me before the noodles burn." "You cook." "Barely." 20 minutes later, they sat on the kitchen counter eating instant ramen from expensive ceramic bowls that probably cost more than Nikolai's monthly grocery budget. "This is the weirdest rich person thing I've ever seen," Nikolai said between bites. Fabian raised an eyebrow. "Ramen? No. Billionaire ramen." Fabian actually laughed quietly. That sound still surprised Nikolai every time. They talked for almost 2 hours after that. Not about work. About real things. Fabian admitted he hated networking events. Nikolai confessed he still sometimes took the subway all the way downtown when he missed his mother because she used to love the city lights at night. At some point, Fabian loosened completely for the first time. He leaned against the kitchen counter with one sleeve rolled up, listening carefully while Nikolai talked about old college stories. And Nikolai caught himself staring. Hard. Fabian noticed. Their eyes locked. The room went very still. Fabian stepped closer slowly. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Looking at me like you're trying to figure something out." Nikolai swallowed. "Maybe I am." Fabian stopped directly in front of him now. "Too close." "You should stop." "That sounds like a warning." "It is." Neither moved. Nikolai could feel Fabian's breath. For one dangerous second, he genuinely thought Fabian was about to kiss him. Then Fabian's phone rang. Fabian shut his eyes briefly, like the interruption physically annoyed him. Nikolai stepped back immediately, heart pounding too fast. Fabian answered the call. His expression changed almost instantly. What happened? The warmth disappeared from his face completely. Nikolai watched the shift happen in real time. Fabian listened silently for almost a minute before speaking again. "I'll handle it." He hung up slowly. "What's wrong?" Nikolai asked. Fabian looked away toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. "My father collapsed." Everything inside the apartment changed after that sentence. Fabian grabbed his jacket immediately. "You should go home." "Are you heading to the hospital?" "Yes." "Then I'm coming with you." Fabian looked genuinely surprised. "Nikolai, you shouldn't drive alone right now." "I'm fine." You look like you're about to punch through the wall." Fabian went quiet. 10 minutes later, they were inside Fabian's black Mercedes heading north through heavy nighttime traffic. For the first hour, Fabian barely spoke. He just stared out the window while city lights blurred across the glass. Finally, Nikolai asked quietly, "You want to talk about him?" "No." "Okay." Another 20 minutes passed. Then Fabian suddenly laughed once. Not happily. "My father spent 30 years trying to turn me into someone else." Nikolai kept driving silently. Fabian leaned back against the seat. "When I came out at 21, he didn't speak to me for almost a year." "That's brutal." "He thought I embarrassed the family." Nikolai glanced over briefly. Fabian's jaw looked tight enough to crack. "But you still kept trying with him." Fabian smiled bitterly. "He's my father." The highway stretched endlessly ahead of them. After a while, Fabian spoke again, quieter this time. "My ex used to say the same thing." Nikolai looked over. "You had a serious relationship?" "For 4 years." "What happened?" Fabian stared out the window again. "He leaked confidential company information to one of our competitors after we broke up." Nikolai blinked hard. "Jesus." "Yeah. That's why you don't trust people." Fabian didn't answer, which was answer enough. Around 2 in the morning, they reached the hospital. The waiting room smelled like coffee and exhaustion. Fabian became cold again immediately. Controlled. Distant. CEO mode, returning piece by piece. Until they entered the hospital room. Then Nikolai saw something he never expected. Fear. Real fear. Fabian's father looked weak beneath the hospital blankets. Older than Fabian had probably prepared himself for. The older man opened his eyes slowly when they entered. "You came." Fabian stood stiff beside the bed. "Of course I came." His father noticed Nikolai standing near the doorway. "Who's that?" "A friend," Fabian answered after a short pause. Something unreadable crossed the older man's face. Nikolai quietly stepped outside to give them privacy. Almost 40 minutes passed before Fabian finally emerged from the room again. And he looked wrecked. Not physically, emotionally, like something inside him had cracked open. Nikolai stood immediately. "Hey." Fabian rubbed one hand across his face hard. He asked if I was happy. Nikolai stayed quiet. Fabian laughed shakily. "After years of pretending I disappointed him, now suddenly he wants to know if I'm happy." "What did you say?" Fabian looked at him for a long moment. "I didn't know." That answer hurt more than Nikolai expected. Fabian leaned against the hallway wall slowly. "Before I left, he told me something." "What?" He said, "Don't spend your entire life becoming successful for people who will never really see you." Silence settled between them. Then Fabian's voice dropped lower. "I think he was trying to apologize." Nikolai stepped closer carefully. "Maybe he was." Fabian shook his head once. "It's too late for apologies." His eyes looked dangerously bright now, like he was seconds away from completely losing control. And suddenly Nikolai couldn't stand the distance anymore. He reached forward and pulled Fabian into his arms. Fabian froze instantly. Then he broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just one sharp breath against Nikolai's shoulder, like he'd been holding himself together for years and finally got tired. Nikolai held him tighter. "You don't have to do everything alone anymore," he whispered. Fabian's hands gripped the back of Nikolai's jacket hard enough to wrinkle the fabric. "Don't say things like that," Fabian said quietly. "Why?" "Because I might start believing you." Nikolai pulled back slightly so he could look at him. Fabian's eyes dropped to his mouth immediately. The tension between them became unbearable. "You know what the worst part is?" Fabian said softly. "What?" "I can't stop thinking about you." Nikolai's heart nearly stopped. Fabian stepped closer, slowly this time, giving him every chance to walk away. Nikolai didn't move. Fabian touched his face carefully, like he still couldn't believe this was real. Then he kissed him, soft at first, almost cautious. But the second Nikolai kissed him back, Fabian made a broken sound against his mouth and pulled him closer immediately. Months of tension crashed into that kiss all at once. The loneliness, the fear, the wanting. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Fabian rested his forehead lightly against Nikolai's. This is a terrible idea. Probably. I'm serious. So am I. For the first time in years, Fabian Vale looked completely defenseless. And Nikolai realized with terrifying clarity that he was already in love with him. Neither of them noticed the figure standing near the far end of the hallway. Liam Cross lowered his phone slowly after taking the picture and smiled. The picture reached the board of directors less than 48 hours later. Not directly. Liam Cross was smarter than that. First came the whispers inside the company. Executives suddenly going quiet when Nikolai entered a room. Meetings being rescheduled without explanation. People staring too long at Fabian whenever Nikolai stood beside him during presentations. Then the articles started online. Valion CEO rumored to be involved with junior employee. Questions raised about internal promotion at Valion Group. No names officially confirmed. But everyone inside the company knew exactly who the articles were talking about. Nikolai sat frozen at his desk reading headlines while panic crawled slowly into his stomach. Across the office, two analysts immediately looked away when he glanced up. Great. His phone buzzed. Fabian, come upstairs. Nikolai exhaled hard before heading toward the executive floor. The second he stepped inside Fabian's office, the door locked automatically behind him. Fabian stood near the windows with his sleeves rolled up, jaw tight with anger. Several printed articles were spread across the desk. Liam, Fabian said coldly. This has his fingerprints all over it. Nikolai walked closer carefully. How bad is it? The board opened an internal review this morning. Nikolai's stomach dropped. Fabian finally looked at him directly. They think I gave you access to the project because we're sleeping together. The brutal honesty of the sentence hit hard. Nikolai crossed his arms tightly. And what did you tell them? The truth. That doesn't narrow it down. Fabian stepped closer. I told them your work speaks for itself. That's not what I asked. Silence. Fabian's eyes darkened slightly. I didn't deny wanting you. The air disappeared from Nikolai's lungs for one dangerous second. Then reality crashed back in immediately. This is bad, Nikolai said quietly. Yes. Fabian, if this gets worse. It won't. You don't know that. Fabian's frustration flashed instantly. And I'm supposed to do what exactly? Pretend you mean nothing to me. Nikolai looked away because that sentence affected him way too much. Fabian moved closer again, voice softer this time. I can handle the board. That's not what scares me. Fabian frowned slightly. Then what does? You losing everything because of me. The room went quiet. Fabian stared at him for several long seconds before speaking again. You are not something ruining my life, Nikolai. But I could. Fabian stepped forward immediately. Stop. No, listen to me. You built this company. Your name is attached to everything here. And I'm a guy who used to deliver paperwork for people like you. Fabian's expression hardened instantly. Don't reduce yourself like that. I'm being realistic. You think I care where you started? That's exactly the problem. I think you care about me too much. Neither man spoke after that. Because it was true. 3 days later, the situation exploded completely. The board demanded financial audits on Fabian's new operations division. Liam privately pushed rumors that Nikolai had manipulated internal reports to justify Fabian's favoritism. Suddenly, every achievement Nikolai earned was being questioned. Even worse, Fabian stopped sleeping entirely. Nikolai found him in his office at 2 in the morning, staring at spreadsheets with bloodshot eyes. You're exhausted, Nikolai said quietly. Fabian didn't look up. I'm busy. You've had 3 coffees in the last hour. I'm still busy. Nikolai walked closer slowly. Fabian. That finally got his attention. And what Nikolai saw scared him. Fabian looked genuinely terrified of losing him. That realization made the decision for him. The next morning, Nikolai submitted his resignation. He packed his desk before sunrise so nobody would stop him. Matteo called halfway through. Tell me you're not actually quitting. I have to. You love him. Nikolai closed his eyes briefly. Exactly. You think leaving fixes this? No. Nikolai admitted softly. But maybe it gives him a chance. He left his company ID card on the desk and walked out before Fabian arrived. By noon, Fabian was furious. Actually furious. The entire executive floor heard him slam his office door hard enough to shake the glass walls. Evelyn nearly looked afraid when Fabian stormed out asking where Nikolai went. Nobody knew, because Nikolai had turned his phone off completely. For 4 straight days, Fabian heard nothing from him. No texts, no calls, nothing. Meanwhile, Liam pushed harder inside the board meetings. He resigned because he knew the investigation would expose inconsistencies. Fabian stared across the conference table with murder in his eyes. Careful, Liam. Liam smiled calmly. You seem emotional today. That was the wrong thing to say. Fabian stood slowly. You've spent weeks trying to weaponize my private life because you think it weakens my position. The room went silent immediately. Fabian tossed a thick folder onto the table. Unfortunately for you, legal finished tracing the financial discrepancies this morning. Liam's smile disappeared instantly. Fabian's voice turned ice cold. Turns out the only corruption in this company leads directly back to you. One by one, the lawyers opened files containing offshore transfers, altered reports, and hidden accounts connected to Liam. The room erupted immediately. What the hell is this? These numbers are real? Liam stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. No, Fabian said calmly. What's ridiculous is thinking I wouldn't notice millions disappearing from my company. Liam looked genuinely panicked now. You can't prove. I already did. Security entered the room moments later. Liam glared at Fabian with open hatred while being escorted out. This isn't over. Fabian didn't even blink. It is for you. The board meeting should have felt like a victory. Instead, Fabian felt empty. Because none of it mattered without Nikolai there. One older board member finally cleared his throat awkwardly. Fabian about the other matter. Fabian looked up slowly. The man hesitated. The rumors. For a moment, the entire room waited. Fabian could have denied everything. Could have protected himself easily. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and spoke calmly. Yes, I'm in love with him. Silence. No one moved. Fabian continued anyway. But Nikolai Reyes earned every position he was given. He is one of the smartest people in this company. And frankly, most of you realized that long before this scandal started. Nobody argued. Because they knew he was right. Fabian stood. If any of you still question my leadership after today, schedule another vote. No one spoke. Meeting over. That night, Fabian drove across Manhattan alone, searching for Nikolai. He checked Mateo's apartment first. Empty. Then the old neighborhood near Nikolai's previous apartment. Nothing. Finally, near midnight, Mateo texted him one address with no explanation. A tiny corner cafe in Brooklyn. The lights inside were dim when Fabian arrived. Rain poured hard against the windows while workers renovated the interior. And there Nikolai stood in paint-stained clothes beside a ladder. Fabian stopped breathing for half a second. Nikolai looked shocked seeing him there. How did you find me? Mateo got tired of listening to me threaten to destroy his phone. That almost made Nikolai smile. Almost. Rain soaked through Fabian's coat while neither moved. Finally, Nikolai spoke quietly. You shouldn't be here. Fabian walked closer immediately. I look for you everywhere. You needed to focus on the company. I did. Nikolai searched his face carefully. What happened? Liam's gone. Nikolai blinked. What? He was stealing from Valion for years. Oh. Fabian stepped even closer now. And I told the board about us. Nikolai stared at him. Fabian, I'm done hiding you. Emotion flashed across Nikolai's face so quickly Fabian almost missed it. You could have lost everything. Fabian's eyes locked onto his. You are not everything I could lose. That broke whatever distance still existed between them. Nikolai crossed the space first and grabbed Fabian's coat hard. Fabian kissed him immediately. Right there in the middle of the half-renovated cafe while rain hammered outside. The kiss felt desperate, relieved, like both of them had spent days barely breathing. When they finally separated, Fabian rested his forehead against Nikolai's. Don't disappear again. Nikolai laughed shakily. You're terrifying when you're emotional. You should have seen me threatening Matteo. I would have paid money for that. Fabian smiled against his mouth softly. Come home with me. Nikolai looked around the cafe, slowly. I bought this place. Fabian blinked once. You what? It used to be my mother's favorite cafe. I wanted to reopen it someday. Fabian looked genuinely surprised. Then softer. Okay, he said quietly. Then we'll go home after. We'll. Not you. Not me. We'll. 6 months later, Valiant's new operations division became the most successful launch in company history. Nikolai officially became director of operations. Fabian publicly stopped pretending Nikolai was only his employee. And one rainy night, long after the city fell asleep, Nikolai accidentally opened the wrong door inside Fabian's penthouse again. Fabian looked up from changing his shirt and burst out laughing. Seriously? Nikolai grinned. In my defense, your apartment is huge. Fabian walked over slowly and pulled him into his arms. You really like opening the wrong doors. Nikolai kissed him softly. Yeah. Fabian smiled against his mouth. Good thing you found the right person behind one. And that's the end of Nikolai and Fabian's story. A story that started with one wrong door, one impossible moment, and two lonely people who never expected to find love in each other. Through fear, pressure, heartbreak, and risk, they finally found a place where they could stop pretending and simply be happy together. Sometimes the biggest changes in life begin with the smallest accidents. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your favorite moment in the comments. And as always, thank you for being here.